The lawyer slid the folder across the table and told me I had 72 hours to decide. Either I signed away my rights to contest my grandmother's will, or my mother would make sure I never saw a single penny from the family. I looked at my mother sitting across from me in that cold conference room in downtown Savannah, and she did not even blink. She just sipped her coffee like she was deciding what to order for lunch. Let me take you back to where this all started. My name is Brooke. I grew up in a small town outside of Savannah, Georgia, the kind of place where everybody knows your business before you do. My mother, Lorraine, raised me and my older brother Garrett mostly on her own after my father passed when I was 11. Daddy had been a quiet man, a mechanic who fixed tractors and farm equipment for half the county. He never made a lot of money, but he kept us fed, kept the lights on, and he loved me in a way that made me feel like I could take on the whole world. When he died, something shifted in my mother. She started looking at me and Garrett differently, like she was calculating which one of us was going to be worth her investment. Garrett was tall, good-looking, charming when he wanted to be. He could walk into a room and make everybody feel like he was the most important person there. Me, I was the quiet one. I got good grades, I kept my head down, I worked a part-time job at the feed store starting at 15. But none of that mattered to my mother because Garrett was her golden child and I was just the girl who happened to live in the same house. My grandmother on my father's side, Nana Ruth, was the only person who saw me clearly after Daddy died. She owned about 40 acres of land out past the county line. Most of it was overgrown. There was an old catfish pond that had gone to mud, a collapsing barn, and a house that had not been updated since 1974. The property had been in our family for 3 generations, but by the time Nana Ruth got old, nobody wanted anything to do with it. The county had put liens on it for unpaid property taxes going back almost a decade. We are talking $63,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. When Nana Ruth passed, she left everything to me and Garrett equally in her will. My mother saw an opportunity. She sat us both down at her kitchen table 2 weeks after the funeral and laid it out like a business proposal. She said Garrett was going to get the rental duplex Nana Ruth owned on the east side of Savannah. It was worth about $350,000, fully paid off, generating $2,800 a month in rental income, and I was going to get the 40 acres of nothing. I asked about the equal split. My mother laughed. She actually laughed. She said the 40 acres was technically worth more on paper if you ignored the tax bet. So really, I was getting the better deal. Then she looked at me with this expression I will never forget. It was pity mixed with amusement. She said, "Brooke, honey, what would you even do with a rental property? You don't know the first thing about managing tenants. Garrett has a business degree. He knows how to handle money." Garrett had a business degree from a college he barely graduated from, and the only thing he had ever managed successfully was running up credit card debt. But I did not say that. I just sat there and listened. My mother told me I had to clear the tax liens within 6 months, or the county would seize the property and sell it at auction. She said it almost cheerfully, like she was giving me a fun little project to keep me busy. Garrett leaned back in his chair and grinned. He said, "Hey, at least you'll have somewhere to pitch a tent." I took the 40 acres, I did not argue, I did not fight. And I will tell you why, because I think this is the part most people would not understand. I had a plan, not a vague idea, not a hope, a plan. See, I had spent 4 years getting my degree in agricultural science from the University of Georgia. I graduated with honors. I had interned at 2 different sustainable farming operations, one in North Carolina and one in Vermont. I knew soil composition, crop rotation, livestock management, and grant writing. I had been quietly researching regenerative agriculture for years, and I knew that 40 acres of neglected Georgia clay, with the right approach, could become something extraordinary. But I also knew my family. I knew that if I told my mother any of this, she would find a way to interfere. She would suddenly decide the land was too valuable to waste on me. She would convince Garrett to contest the will, so I kept my mouth shut. I signed the papers, I took my 40 acres of mud and weeds and broken fences, and I got to work. The first thing I did was call my best friend from college, Dana. Dana was a tax attorney who had just started her own practice in Atlanta. I told her about the liens, and she spent 3 weeks going through every document. She found that the county had miscalculated the penalties on 2 separate occasions, which brought the actual amount owed down to $41,000. Still a lot of money, but manageable. I took out a USDA farm loan. Most people do not know this, but the USDA has programs specifically designed to help beginning farmers acquire and develop agricultural land. I qualified for a direct farm ownership loan with a low interest rate and a 40-year repayment term. I used part of it to clear the liens and part of it to start the basic infrastructure work. For the first year, I lived in Nana Ruth's old house with no central air, a leaking roof, and a kitchen where the linoleum was peeling up in sheets. I patched what I could. I slept on a mattress on the floor for 3 months until I could afford a bed frame. I showered with water that came out rust-colored for the first 30 seconds every morning. And I worked. I worked from before sunrise to after dark 7 days a week. I cleared the land section by section. I rebuilt the fences. I dredged the catfish pond and restocked it. I planted cover crops to start rehabilitating the soil. I partnered with a local heritage breed hog farmer named Carl who was looking to expand. Carl was 62 years old, had been raising Ossabaw Island hogs for 30 years, and knew more about sustainable pork production than anyone I had ever met. We struck a deal. He would provide the initial breeding stock and his expertise. I would provide the land and the labor. We would split the profits 60-40, his favor, until I had learned enough to manage the operation on my own. By the end of year 1, I had 12 Ossabaw hogs, a functioning catfish pond, and 2 acres of specialty produce that I was selling at the Savannah farmers market every Saturday. I was not getting rich, but I was breaking even, and the land was starting to come alive. My mother did not visit once during that entire first year. Neither did Garrett. They did not call to check on me. They did not ask if I needed help. As far as they were concerned, I was out there playing in the dirt, and sooner or later I would give up and come crawling back. Year 2 is when things started to change. I got accepted into a regenerative agriculture accelerator program that came with a $50,000 grant and mentorship from some of the top sustainable farmers in the Southeast. I used that money to build a small processing facility on the property so I could sell direct-to-consumer pork products. Ossabaw hogs produce some of the most flavorful pork in the world. Chefs in Savannah and Charleston were paying premium prices. I am talking $18 a pound for heritage pork chops. I also started growing specialty mushrooms, shiitakes, lion's mane, oyster mushrooms. I set up a low-tech growing operation in the old barn after reinforcing the structure. The mushrooms were a hit at the farmers market and with local restaurants. Within 6 months, I had a waiting list. I fixed up Nana Ruth's house. New roof, new plumbing, new kitchen. I did a lot of the work myself and hired local contractors for the rest. By the time I was done, it was not fancy, but it was solid and comfortable and mine. Carl became like a second father to me. He showed up every morning at 6 with 2 cups of coffee, and we would walk the property together, checking on the hogs, planning the next phase. His wife, Miss Darlene, brought me dinner 3 times a week because she said I was too skinny and worked too hard. They were the family I chose, and they never let me down. And then, in the spring of my 2nd year on the property, my mother found out. I do not know exactly how. I think one of her church friends saw my booth at the Savannah Farmers Market and mentioned it. Or maybe she saw the feature the local newspaper did on my farm. Either way, she showed up one Saturday morning, unannounced, driving Garrett's black Escalade, parking it right in the middle of my gravel driveway like she owned the place. She got out of the car and just stood there, looking around. I watched her from the porch. She saw the hogs in their rotational paddocks. She saw the mushroom barn. She saw the catfish pond with its new dock. She saw the house with its fresh paint and new metal roof, and her face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Surprise, confusion, anger, jealousy, and then something I had never seen from her before, calculation. She walked up to the porch and said, "Well, Brooke, looks like you've been busy." I said, "Yes, ma'am," she said. She wanted a tour. So I gave her one. I showed her everything: the hog operation, the mushroom barn, the processing facility, the produce gardens, the pond. I showed her the books. I told her about the restaurant contracts, the farmers market revenue, the grants. I told her the property had been independently appraised at $480,000, not counting the business value. She went quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "This should belong to the whole family." I said, "Nana Ruth left it to me." She said, "Nana Ruth didn't know what it would become." That was the beginning. 3 weeks later, Garrett called me for the first time in 2 years. He was friendly, warm, acting like we had never lost touch. He said he had been thinking about family and how important it was to stick together. He said he had some business ideas that could really take the farm to the next level. He wanted to come visit and talk things over. I said, "Sure, come on down." He showed up with his wife, Tanya, and their 2 kids. They stayed for the weekend. Garrett walked around the property with his hands in his pockets, nodding like a real estate appraiser. Tanya took pictures of everything on her phone. At dinner, Garrett pitched his idea. He wanted to turn the farm into an agritourism destination. Farm-to-table dining events, wedding venues, glamping tents, the whole package. He said he had connections with investors in Atlanta who would put up the capital. All I had to do was sign over a controlling interest in the property to a new LLC that he would manage. I asked him what happened to the rental duplex. The table went quiet. Tanya looked at her plate. Garrett cleared his throat and said the rental market had been tough lately. What he did not say, and what I already knew from Dana's research, was that he had taken out a home equity line of credit against the duplex, blown through the money on a failed restaurant venture in Midtown Atlanta, and was now 3 months behind on the HELOC payments. The duplex was in pre-foreclosure. Garrett, the brilliant financial mind of the family, was about $240,000 in debt. I told Garrett I would think about his proposal. He took that as a yes. A month later, my mother called. She did not ask how I was. She said Garrett was going through a difficult time and that as a family we needed to support each other. She said the smart thing to do would be to bring Garrett on as a partner in the farm so he could get back on his feet. She said I owed it to the family. I asked her where this sense of family obligation was when I was living in a house with no air conditioning and a leaking roof. She said I was being selfish. 2 weeks after that phone call, I came home from the farmer's market on a Saturday afternoon and found Garrett's Escalade in my driveway again. Except this time, there was also a U-Haul trailer attached to it. Garrett and Tanya were carrying boxes into my house. My mother was sitting in a rocking chair on my porch, directing traffic. I parked my truck and walked up to the porch. I asked my mother what was happening. She said Garrett and Tanya had lost their apartment in Atlanta and needed a place to stay temporarily. She said it was my Christian duty to take in family. She said she would be staying too to help with the kids. I looked at Garrett. He shrugged and said, "It's just until I get the investment deal sorted out. 2 months tops." Now, this is the part where everyone listening is going to say, "Brooke, why didn't you throw them out right then and there?" And I understand that reaction. Believe me, I do. But here is what you need to understand. Dana and I had been preparing for this. When my mother first showed up at the farm and said, "This should belong to the whole family," I called Dana that same night. I told her what was coming. Dana said, "They're going to try to take it. We need to be ready." Over the next several weeks, Dana and I built a legal fortress around that property. We created a trust. We documented every improvement I had made, every dollar I had invested, every contract I had signed. Dana also started looking into Garrett's finances, and what she found was worse than we expected. The failed restaurant, the HELOC, the credit card debt, and something else. Garrett had been claiming the rental duplex income on his taxes, but had also been claiming losses from a business that did not actually exist. That is tax fraud. Federal tax fraud. Dana said if we played this right, we could not only protect the farm but make sure Garrett could never come after me again. But we needed evidence. We needed him to show his hand. We needed him to make moves on paper that we could document. So when Garrett moved in, I let him. I let my mother boss me around in my own kitchen. I let Tanya redecorate my living room with her ugly throw pillows. I let Garrett walk around my property telling my farmhands what to do. I gritted my teeth and I waited because every single thing they did, every conversation they had in my house, every demand they made was building the case. Carl knew what was going on. I told him everything. He did not like it, but he understood. He said, "Girl, you've got the patience of a fishing spider, just sitting on the water, waiting for something dumb enough to swim by." That is exactly what I was doing. Garrett wasted no time. Within the first 2 weeks, he started making changes. He fired one of my part-time farmhands because he said we did not need the extra labor cost. He renegotiated one of my restaurant contracts without telling me, agreeing to lower prices because he wanted to build a relationship with the owner for his agritourism plan. He ordered $5,000 worth of glamping equipment on a credit card that he opened in the name of my farm's LLC without my authorization. Every single one of these things Dana documented. My mother, meanwhile, appointed herself the manager of the household. She rearranged my kitchen. She told me what to cook for dinner. She invited her church friends over for a lunch on my property and told them it was the family estate. She criticized everything I wore, everything I said, every decision I made. One evening she told me I should be grateful that Garrett was here to finally run things properly because a farm this valuable needed a man's touch. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste copper. 6 weeks into their stay, Garrett came to me with a stack of papers. He said he had drawn up the LLC documents for the new agritourism venture. He said all I had to do was sign, and he would handle the rest. The LLC would hold the property, and we would be equal partners. I took the papers and told him I needed a few days to review them. He said, "What's to review?" It's standard stuff. I said I wanted my lawyer to look at them. He rolled his eyes and said, "You don't need a lawyer for family business." I brought the papers to Dana. She read through them in 20 minutes and then looked at me over her glasses and said, "Brooke, this isn't an equal partnership. If you sign this, Garrett gets a 60% controlling interest. He can make decisions about the property without your approval. He can sell it, mortgage it, whatever he wants. And look at this clause here. If the LLC takes on debt, you're personally liable as a co-signer, but he's not." So Garrett was not just trying to move in. He was trying to take everything I had built and saddle me with his debt while he walked away clean. Dana said it was time. Here is what we did. Dana drafted a new set of documents. On the surface, they looked similar to what Garrett had proposed. Same formatting, same legal language, same structure. But the substance was completely different. Under Dana's version, the new LLC would assume all existing financial obligations associated with the property, including any debts, liens, or legal liabilities incurred by its managing member. The managing member would be Garrett. And buried in the operating agreement, in language that looked like standard boilerplate, was a clause that stated the managing member personally guaranteed all obligations of the LLC and waived the right to contest or transfer those obligations. In plain English, whoever signed as managing member was taking personal responsibility for everything, every debt, every legal problem, everything. I went back to Garrett and told him I had a counteroffer. I said I had been thinking about it, and he was right. The farm needed someone with business experience to take it to the next level. I said I was willing to give him the controlling interest he wanted, but I needed some protections for myself. I said my lawyer had made some small adjustments to his original documents. Standard stuff, I said, using his own words back at him. Garrett barely looked at the papers. He flipped to the signature page, pulled out a pen, and signed. He signed every page. He initialed every clause. He did not read a single word. I signed too, but my signature was on a separate agreement that Dana had prepared. An agreement that transferred my personal assets, including my share of the farm's operational income, into the trust we had already established. Legally, I had separated myself from the LLC entirely. I was an employee of my own trust, and the LLC that Garrett now controlled was an empty vessel loaded with debt and legal liability. 2 weeks after Garrett signed those papers, Dana filed a report with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division about Garrett's fraudulent tax filings. She included bank statements, fake business filings, and the falsified tax returns. She had been sitting on this evidence for months, waiting for the right moment. 3 weeks after that, I came home from the farmer's market, and there were 2 federal vehicles parked in my driveway. 4 agents in Navy windbreakers were standing on my porch. My mother was sitting in the rocking chair with her mouth hanging open. Garrett was in the kitchen, eating my food, when they walked in and asked him to step outside. They told him he was under investigation for tax fraud, wire fraud, and filing false business documents. They told him the LLC he had just signed as managing member was now part of the investigation. They told him he might want to get a lawyer. Garrett looked at me like I had pulled the ground out from under his feet. He said, "Brooke, what did you do?" I said, "I didn't do anything, Garrett. You signed the papers. You committed the fraud. I just made sure the right people found out about it." My mother stood up from that rocking chair and grabbed my arm. She was shaking. She said, "You planned this. You planned all of this." I said, "You're the one who said Garrett was the brilliant financial mind of the family. I just let him prove it." She started crying. She said I was destroying the family. She said Daddy would be ashamed of me. That one hurt. I will not pretend it did not. But I looked at her and I said, "Daddy left me Nana Ruth's land because he knew I would take care of it. You tried to take it from me and give it to someone who would have destroyed it. Don't you dare bring Daddy into this." The agents took Garrett's phone and his laptop that day. They told him not to leave the state. Tanya was upstairs packing before the agents even pulled out of the driveway. My mother called me every name she could think of, then she got in Garrett's Escalade and drove away. She did not say goodbye. Within 2 months, Garrett was formally indicted on 4 federal counts. The duplex, which was already in pre-foreclosure, was seized as part of the investigation. Tanya filed for divorce. My mother moved in with her sister in Florida and told everyone in the family that I was the one who destroyed everything. Dana called me the day the indictment was announced. She said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Tired," and I meant it. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel satisfied. I felt tired in a way that sleep could not fix, because the truth is I did not want any of this to happen. I wanted a mother who was proud of me. I wanted a brother who respected me. I wanted a family that saw my value without me having to prove it by outsmarting them in a legal chess match, but that is not the family I got. The farm is doing well. Carl and I expanded the hog operation last fall. We have 36 Ossabaw hogs now, and we just signed a distribution deal with a specialty grocery chain that has 12 locations across Georgia and South Carolina. The mushroom operation tripled. I hired 3 full-time employees and 2 seasonal workers. The catfish pond is the most productive it has been in 20 years. I rebuilt Nana Ruth's house one more time. Not because it needed it, but because I wanted it to feel like home. I put in a big farm table in the kitchen, the kind where you can seat 12 people. Most nights it is just me and my dog, a mutt named Rooster, but on Sundays Carl and Miss Darlene come over and we cook dinner together. Sometimes Dana drives down from Atlanta and stays the weekend. We sit on the porch and watch the sun go down over the pastures, and we do not talk about Garrett or my mother or any of it. 6 months after the indictment, my mother called me. I almost did not answer. But I did, because despite everything, she is still my mother. She did not apologize. She said she needed money. She said Garrett's legal fees were destroying her savings. She said she needed me to wire $30,000 to his attorney's office by the end of the month. I said no. She said I was heartless. I said, Mama, I love you, but I am done setting myself on fire to keep this family warm. She hung up. I sat on the porch for a long time after that call. Rooster put his head in my lap and I scratched behind his ears, and I thought about Nana Ruth. I thought about how she used to say that land does not lie. You put work into it, it gives back. You neglect it, it goes wild. You try to cheat it, it swallows you whole. She was right about the land, and she was right about people too. Last month I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my mother's handwriting. It said, I should have given you the duplex. I should have given Garrett the dirt. I see that now. That is the closest thing to an apology I will ever get from her. And you know what? I folded that letter up and put it in the drawer of Nana Ruth's old desk, right next to the original deed to the 40 acres, because that letter and that deed tell the same story. They both say that the person everyone underestimated was the one who was paying attention all along. I am not telling you the story because I want you to feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because I know there is someone listening right now who is in the middle of their own 40 acres of nothing. Someone whose family gave them the worst hand and laughed about it. Someone who is out there in the heat and the mud, wondering if any of it is worth it. It is worth it, every single day of it. And to my mother, if you are listening, I hope you understand now. The pig farm girl built something you could never take away. Not because I was smarter than Garrett. Not because I was luckier than Garrett, but because I was willing to do the work that nobody else wanted to do, on the land that nobody else wanted to love, and that made all the difference. If this story hit home for you, leave a comment and tell me about a time when someone underestimated you. I read every single one. And if you are new here, go ahead and subscribe to Floppy Revenge and tap that notification bell so you do not miss the next story. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and take care of the people who actually deserve it.